Los Angeles police thought that the murder of a young woman last March was an isolated act of violence, but since then they've come to believe it was connected to a wide-ranging series of assaults by a killer who's become known as the Night Stalker, a killer who apparently struck again during the weekend. We have a report from Nadine Berger.
Police today continue to search for any clues in the near-fatal shooting of 29-year-old William Carnes and the rape of his girlfriend. They're apparently the latest victims of the Night Stalker, thought to be responsible now for 34 brutal attacks, 14 of them fatal. These serial killings, once confined to the near Los Angeles area, are now spread over 500 miles from San Francisco to Orange County. Just as before, the assailant entered a house in a quiet middle-class neighborhood in the pre-dawn hours on Sunday through an unlocked window and attacked the couple while they slept. Neighbors are terrified.
Guy just sleep with my hand on right by my bed and a sawed-off shotgun, which I always have.
I see. Why is that?
Because if anybody comes in my house, they're not leaving.
The killer, who attacks randomly, is described as white, 25 to 30 years old, with a predominant feature of badly stained teeth. So 5,000 flyers have been distributed to Los Angeles dentists asking for help with identification. And last week, San Francisco Mayor Dianne Feinstein announced ballistic tests have definitely linked the murder of a man there to the Night Stalker. But release of that information has outraged a Los Angeles sheriff frustrated by the difficulty of tracking a random murderer.
It places this community in jeopardy because it impedes our ability to go forward fully with the investigation.
A total of $35,000 in rewards has been offered, including today a $16 donation from this group of concerned school children. Today, the search for California's Night Stalker continues, and many residents sleep with their doors and windows bolted tight, despite 100-degree temperatures.
Richard Ramirez was an American serial killer, serial rapist, kidnapper, pedophile, and burglar. His highly publicized home invasion crime spree terrorized the residents of the greater Los Angeles area and later the residents of the San Francisco Bay Area from June 1984 until August 1985. Prior to his capture, Ramirez was dubbed the Night Stalker by the news media. Ramirez was born in El Paso, Texas on February 29, 1960, the youngest of Julian and Mercedes Ramirez's 5 children. His father was a Mexican national and a former policeman who later became a laborer. He was prone to fits of anger that often resulted in physical abuse. As a 12-year-old, Richard, or Richie, was strongly influenced by his older cousin Miguel, a decorated Green Beret combat veteran who had served during the Vietnam War. He shared Polaroid photos of his victims, including Vietnamese women that he had raped. In some of the photos, Mike posed with the severed head of a woman he had abused. Richie, who had begun smoking marijuana at the age of 10, bonded with Mike over joints and gory war stories. Mike taught his young cousins some of his military skills, such as killing with stealth. Around this time, Ramirez began to sleep in a local cemetery. He was present on May the 4th, 1973, when his cousin Mike fatally shot his wife, Jessie, in the face with a .38 caliber revolver during a domestic argument. After the shooting, Richard became sullen and withdrawn from his family and peers. Later that year, Richard moved in with his older sister Ruth and her husband Roberto, an obsessive peeping Tom who took Richie along on his nocturnal exploits. Ramirez also began using LSD and cultivated an interest in Satanism. He dropped out of Jefferson High School in the 9th grade, and at the age of 22, he moved to California, where he settled permanently. On April 10, 1984, Ramirez murdered 9-year-old Chinese-American Mei Lun in the basement of the hotel where he was living. He raped and beat the girl before stabbing her to death and hanging the body from a pipe. This Ramirez's first known killing, was not identified as being connected to the subsequent crime spree until 2009, when Ramirez's DNA was matched to a sample obtained at this crime scene. On June 28, 1984, 79-year-old Jenny Vincow was found brutally murdered in her apartment in Glassell Park, Los Angeles. She had been stabbed repeatedly whilst asleep in her bed, and her throat slashed so deeply that she was nearly decapitated. Ramirez's fingerprint was found on a mesh screen he removed to gain access through an open window. On March 17, 1985, Ramirez attacked 22-year-old Maria Hernandez outside her home in Rosemead, California, shooting her in the face with a .22 caliber handgun after she pulled into her garage. She survived when the bullet ricocheted off the keys she held in her hands as she lifted them to protect herself. Inside her house, her roommate, Dale Yoshi Okazaki, age 34, heard the gunshot and ducked behind a counter when she saw Ramirez enter the kitchen. When she raised her head, he shot her once in the forehead, killing her. Within an hour of the Rosemead home invasion, Ramirez pulled 30-year-old Ty Leanne Veronica Yu out of her car in Monterey Park, shot her twice with a .22 caliber handgun, and fled. She was pronounced dead upon arrival at the hospital. On March 27, 1985, Ramirez entered a home that he had burglarized a year earlier just outside of Whittier, California, at approximately 2 a.m. and killed the sleeping Vincent Charles Zazzara, age 64, with a gunshot to his head from a .22 caliber handgun. Zazzara's wife, Maxine Lavinia Zazzara, aged 44, was awakened by the gunshot. Ramirez beat her and bound her hands while demanding to know where her valuables were. Whilst he ransacked the room, Maxine escaped her bonds and retrieved a shotgun from under the bed, which was not loaded. The infuriated Ramirez shot her 3 times with the .22, then fetched a large carving knife from the kitchen. He mutilated her body by stabbing her several times, then gouged out her eyes and placed them in a jewelry box, which he left with. On 14th of May 1985, Ramirez returned to Monterey Park and entered the home of Bill Doy, age 66, and his disabled wife Lillian, age 56. Surprising Doy in his bedroom, Ramirez shot him in the face with the .22 as Doy went for his own handgun. After beating the mortally wounded man into unconsciousness, Ramirez entered Lillian's bedroom, bound her with thumb cuffs, then raped her after he had ransacked the home for valuables. Bill Doy died of his injuries while in the hospital. On 29th of May 1985, Ramirez drove a stolen car to Monrovia and stopped at the house of Mabel Marbell, aged 83, and her disabled sister, Florence Nettie Lang, aged 81. Finding a hammer in the kitchen, he bludgeoned and bound Lang in her bedroom, then bound and bludgeoned Bell before using an electric cord to shock the woman. After raping Lang, he used Bell's lipstick to draw the satanic pentagram symbol on her thigh, as well as on the walls of both bedrooms. The women were found 2 days later alive but comatose. Bell later died of her injuries. The next day, Ramirez drove the same car to Burbank and sneaked into the home of Carol Kyle, aged 42. At gunpoint, he bound Kyle and her 11-year-old son with handcuffs, then ransacked the house. He released Kyle to direct him to where the family's valuables were. He then raped her repeatedly. Ramirez also ordered her not to look at him, telling her at one point that he would cut her eyes out. He fled the scene after retrieving the child from the closet and binding the two together again with handcuffs. On the night of July 2nd, 1985, he drove a stolen car to Arcadia and randomly selected the house of Mary Louise Cannon, age 75, a widowed grandmother. He found her asleep in her bedroom. He bludgeoned her into unconsciousness with a lamp and then repeatedly stabbed her using a 10-inch butcher knife. She was found dead at the scene. July the 5th, 1985. Ramirez broke into a home in the Sierra Madre and bludgeoned 16-year-old Whitney Bennett with a tire iron as she slept in her bedroom. After searching in vain for a knife in the kitchen, Ramirez attempted to strangle the girl with a telephone cord. He stated that he was startled to see electrical sparks emanate from the cord, and when his victim began to breathe, he fled the house, believing that Jesus Christ had intervened and saved her. Bennett survived this savage beating, although 478 stitches were required to close the lacerations on her scalp. July the 7th, 1985. Ramirez burglarized the home of Joyce Lucille Nelson, age 61, in Monterey Park. Finding her asleep on her living room couch, he beat her to death using his fists and kicking her in the head. A shoe print from his Aviva sneaker was left imprinted on her face. After cruising to other neighborhoods, he chose the home of Sophie Dickman, age 63. He assaulted and handcuffed Dickman at gunpoint, attempted to rape her, stole her jewelry. When she swore to him that he had taken everything of value, he told her to swear on Satan. July the 20th, 1985. Ramirez purchased a machete before driving a stolen Toyota to Glendale, California. He chose the home of Leila Nealing, age 66, and her husband, Maxon, age 68. He burst in on the sleeping couple's bedroom and hacked them with the machete, then killed them with shots to the head from a .22 caliber handgun. He further mutilated their bodies with the machete before robbing the house of valuables. Ramirez then drove to Sun Valley, where at approximately 4:15 a.m. he broke into the home of the Covenant family. He shot the sleeping husband in the head with a .25 caliber handgun, killing him instantly, then repeatedly raped and beat some kid Covenant. He bound the couple's terrified 8-year-old son before dragging some kid around the house to reveal the location of any valuable items, which he stole. During his assault, he demanded that she swear to Satan. On August the 6th, 85, Ramirez drove to Northridge and broke into the home of Chris and Virginia Peterson. He crept into the bedroom, startled Virginia, age 27, and shot her in the face with a .25 caliber semi-automatic handgun. He then shot Chris in the neck and attempted to flee. Chris fought back, while avoiding being hit by 2 more shots during the struggle, before Ramirez managed to escape. The couple survived their injuries. August the 8th, 1985. Ramirez drove a stolen car to Diamond Bar, California, and chose the home of Sakina Abwath, age 27, and her husband Elias, age 31. Sometime after 2:30 a.m., he entered the house and went into the master bedroom. He instantly killed the sleeping Elias with a shot to the head from his gun. He handcuffed and beat Sakina whilst forcing her to reveal the location of the family's jewelry, and then brutally raped her. He then demanded that she swear on Satan that she would not scream during his assaults. When the couple's 3-year-old son entered the bedroom, Ramirez tied the child up and continued to rape Sakina. After Ramirez left the home, Sakina untied her son and sent him to the neighbors for help. Ramirez, who had been following the media coverage of his crimes, then left Los Angeles and headed to San Francisco. On August 18, 1985, he entered the home of Peter and Barbara Pan. He shot the sleeping Peter, age 66, in the temple with a .22 caliber handgun. He then beat and sexually assaulted Barbara, age 62, before shooting her in the head and leaving her for dead. At the crime scene, Ramirez used lipstick to scrawl a pentagram and the phrase, "Jack the Knife," on the bedroom wall. When it was discovered that the ballistics and shoe print evidence from the LA crime scenes matched this crime scene, San Francisco's then mayor divulged the information in a televised press conference. Ramirez remained in the area for a few more days before heading back to the LA area. August 24th, 1985, Ramirez traveled 76 miles south of Los Angeles in a stolen orange Toyota. That night, he arrived at the home of James Romero Jr., who had just returned from a family vacation. Romero's son, 13-year-old James Romero III, happened to be awake and heard Ramirez's footsteps outside the house. Thinking there was a prowler, the child went to wake his parents and Ramirez fled the scene. James raced outside and noted the color, make, and style of the car before contacting the police. After this encounter, Ramirez broke into the house of Bill Carnes, age 30, and his fiancée, age 29, through a back door. Ramirez entered the sleeping couple's bedroom. He shot Carnes 3 times in the head before turning his attention to Erickson. Ramirez told the terrified woman that he was the Night Stalker and forced her to swear she loved Satan as he beat her with his fists and bound her with neckties from the closet. After stealing what he could find, Ramirez dragged Erickson to another room before raping her. He demanded more cash and more jewelry and made her swear on Satan. Before leaving the home, Ramirez told Erickson, "Tell them the Night Stalker was here." Erickson gave a detailed description of the assailant to investigators, and police obtained a cast of Ramirez's footprint from the Romero house. The stolen car was found abandoned on August 28th at the Wilshire Center in Los Angeles, and police obtained a single fingerprint from the rear-view mirror despite Ramirez's careful efforts to wipe the car clean of his prints. The print was positively identified as belonging to Ramirez, who was described as a 25-year-old drifter from Texas, along with a long rap sheet that included many arrests for traffic and illegal drug violations. Law enforcement officials released a mugshot of Ramirez from December 12, 1984, and the Night Stalker finally had a face. At the police conference it was announced, "We know who you are now, and soon everyone else will. There will be no place you can hide." On the 30th of August 1985, Ramirez took a bus to Tucson, Arizona to visit his brother, unaware that he had become the lead story in virtually every major newspaper and television news program across California. After failing to meet his brother, he returned to Los Angeles on the morning of August 31st. He walked past police officers who were staking out the bus terminal in hopes of catching the killer should he attempt to flee. After noticing a group of elderly Mexican women fearfully identifying him as El Matador, the killer, Ramirez saw his face on the front pages of the newspaper rack and fled in a panic. After running across the Santa Ana freeway, he attempted to carjack a woman but was chased away by bystanders who pursued him. After hopping over several fences and attempting 2 more carjackings, he was eventually subdued by a group of residents, one of whom had struck him over the head with a metal bar in the pursuit. The group held Ramirez down and relentlessly beat him until the police arrived and took him into custody. Ramirez's trial began on July the 22nd, 1988. At his first court appearance, Ramirez raised a hand with a pentagram drawn on it and yelled, "Hail Satan." On August the 14th, the trial was interrupted because one of the jurors, Phyllis Singletary, did not arrive at the courtroom. Later that day, she was found shot to death in her apartment. The jury was terrified, wondering if Ramirez had somehow directed this event from inside his prison cell. However, it was ultimately determined that Ramirez was not responsible for Singletary's death. On September the 20th, 1989, Ramirez was convicted of all charges: 13 counts of murder, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. He was sentenced to die in California's gas chamber. He stated to reporters afterwards, "Big deal. Death always went with the territory. See you in Disneyland." By the time of the trial, Ramirez had fans who were writing him letters and paying him visits. In 1988, Ramirez proposed to a fan. On October the 3rd, 1996, Ramirez and Doreen Loyoy were married in California's San Quentin State Prison. However, she eventually left him in 2009 after DNA evidence confirmed he had raped and murdered 9-year-old Mei Lung. Ramirez died of complications secondary to B-cell lymphoma in California on June the 7th, 2013. He had also been affected by chronic substance abuse and chronic hepatitis C viral infections. Psychiatrist Michael H. Stone describes Ramirez as a made psychopath as opposed to a born psychopath. He says that Ramirez's schizoid personality disorder contributed to his indifference to the suffering of his victims and his untreatability. Stone also stated that Ramirez was knocked unconscious and almost died on multiple occasions before he was 6 years old, and as a result later developed temporal lobe epilepsy, aggressivity, and hypersexuality. As always, our thoughts go out to the loved ones of the victims of his heinous, terrible crimes.
Do you admit to being evil, Richard?
We are all evil in some form or another, are we not?
Convicted serial killer Richard Ramirez seemed to relish the concept of evil, and once upon a time, a lot of folks in the state of California viewed the one-time Texas altar boy as evil's human embodiment.
Yes, I am evil. Not 100%, but I am evil.
In the summer of 1985, the Texas drifter descended like a deadly disease on a hot California night. A one-man epidemic of madness and murder, one of America's first serial killers to be given a brand name, the name, the Night Stalker.
Lock your doors, lock your windows. If you have the ability to provide additional security devices, then by all means do so.
Who wants to be next? I don't. No one else does.
He preyed on both women and men, young and old. He slipped through windows, slit throats, raped, tortured, and killed.
What he did to me has been the total destruction of my life and my girlfriend's life.
Former computer engineer Bill Carnes, one of Ramirez's many victims. One night, Carnes and his girlfriend were assaulted in their bed. The woman was raped and Bill Carnes shot 3 times in the head. Bill Carnes ended up in a group home with a bullet still lodged in his brain.
He stole my memory. He took my girlfriend. He took my career. And this was just an unprovoked attack.
But after dozens of such attacks, police identified their suspect, and on the morning of August 1st, 1985, Richard Ramirez's picture ran on front pages, and within hours, angry residents of this East LA neighborhood spotted, captured, and then severely beat Richard Ramirez as he tried to steal a car to evade police.
We're happy to announce that the individual we have in custody is Richard Ramirez,
the Night Stalker.
I can't begin to tell you how proud we, all of us, are of the people in this community who, to a man and a woman, were involved in trying to track this guy down and capture him.
That night, there was dancing in the streets of the East L.A. neighborhood where Ramirez was caught, but in court, the case dragged on for 4 long years, with the Texas drifter frequently disrupting the proceedings by displaying satanic signs and shouting obscenities at the judge.
This trial is a joke.
Would the jury in the above entitled action find the defendant, Richard Ramirez, guilty of murder?
But in the end, the jury sent Richard Ramirez to California's death row for 13 murders. I first met Richard Ramirez shortly after his L.A. conviction. Richard had been transferred to a jail in San Francisco, where he was charged with and ultimately would be found guilty of a 14th murder.
What do you want the world to know about you?
The world has been fed many lies about me. I have read very few truths.
Who are you?
Just a guy. Just a guy.
At the time, Ramirez was certainly a guy attracting a lot of attention. Since his arrival at the San Francisco jail, women from around the country, including one of the female jurors who had found him guilty in Los Angeles, had been flocking to the San Francisco facility, even fighting with each other over Richard's affections.
I have friends. That is all I care to say, really. They are open-minded people.
And it was here, in a cramped room in a San Francisco jail, that I interviewed the man known as the Night Stalker. A memorable face-off, with me asking questions, and Ramirez, for the most part, reading from a script.
Did you kill 13 people?
It would be improper for me to comment on my LA convictions and on my pending case here in San Francisco.
Why?
Because of my appeals.
Are you appealing these because you say you're innocent? You didn't kill 13 people?
That is correct.
You didn't kill 13 people?
Again, it would be improper for me to comment in any regard to that question.
You have now entered a very rare group of people in this country. You're in the ranks of Charlie Manson, Ted Bundy. You claim you didn't commit these murders, but you're right in there now as far as everybody else is concerned.
Serial killers do on a small scale what governments do on a large one. They are a product of the times, and these are bloodthirsty times. Even psychopaths have emotions if you dig deep enough, but then again, maybe they don't.
Do you have emotions, Richard?
No comment.
Tell me what kind of emotions you got going through you right now.
I'll There are different sects of Satanism.
Have you studied, just yes or no, have you studied Satanism?
Yes, I have.
Are you a worshiper of the devil?
No comment.
Come on, Richard.
I can tell you a little bit about Satanism.
Well, I'm interested in hearing what you got to say then.
It is undefiled wisdom instead of hypocritical self-deceit. It is power without charity. A Satanist admits to being evil.
Do you admit to being evil, Richard?
We are all evil in some form or another, are we not?
I'm asking you the questions, my friend.
Yes, I am evil. Not 100%, but I am evil. Evil has always existed. The perfect world most people seek shall never come to pass, and it's going to get worse. The great epochs of our life is when we gain the courage to rebaptize our evil qualities as being our best qualities.
And as the interview draws to a close, I cannot help but recall Bill Carnes and the thought that behind this glib young man, who seems to flatter himself as a kind of rock star outlaw, lies the bodies of at least 13 innocent